It has really varied a lot. I didn't really count the hours at the beginning, but I know it was a lot, pretty much all day whenever I could, when I didn't have to go to school. But I think depends on how many performances. If I don't have any concerts coming up, sometimes I'll be delinquent on my practice. But I think I like to practice about 4 or 5 hours a day. It really varies. I mean, if I'm playing a lot of close up, like if I do a big tour and I'm doing concerts almost every night, I won't practice at all, because it's just, my hands are already in really good shape. And unless I'm having difficulties with certain passages, and then I'll try to analyze why I'm having those problems, and then program myself a different way to play those passages so that they're not such a problem. Yes.
I'll maybe repeat a little bit of question I asked you earlier about the habaneros and the waltzes. I asked you if they were recorded, and I also wondered how many have you written, and have you written any other dance forms? As far as those pieces have not been recorded commercially yet, but I have a deal going for doing a CD this year, and I'd like to do all habaneras and all. I've written 8 habaneras and 8 waltzes, and I'd like to do all of those on one CD, but I haven't really made up my mind yet, and I might just do a variety of different things. And yeah, I have used other dance forms. I've written a tango, for example. I've written a milonga, which is Argentine dance, and then I've written using Baroque dance forms, like the sarban and the bourrée. I can't offhand. I'm sure I've written other types of dance forms. I just can't think of anything offhand right now. Yes.
I don't know that I could do them justice, but I'd like to learn or try to play some of the material that you've written.
Right.
If it's out in published form, I'd sure be interested.
It's not out in published form yet. I have several different possibilities right now, and I have to decide who I want to publish my music. What I would prefer to have the CD out first, because that'll sell the published music. If it's the other way around, I don't think people, like Guitar Solo in San Francisco has agreed to, if they don't publish it themselves, they still will distribute my stuff, which will be worldwide. They send catalogs all over the world. And but if someone gets a catalog and sees my name and these pieces, they won't have any idea what it sounds like. But I think adding the CD first that's my first priority. Anyone else?
Did you ever study composition? I assume you did study composition.
As a matter of fact, no. No. I started I studied musical theory and so forth, but and I started composing as soon as I started playing. I just came naturally. And then when I was 18 years old, the first year I studied with Segovia, I was 18, 19, 20, I was practicing 12 hours a day. And I just was so discontent with how I was composing, and realizing and felt that in order for me to compose to my satisfaction, I'd have to give up being a performer and spend all my time studying composition and to really do it right. So I decided when I was 18 that I would definitely not be a composer. Nonetheless, ideas still kept coming, and so every now and then I would write something, and then and I never performed any of my own stuff until 1987.
and I had a dream shortly after a very close friend of mine died, and there was this dream tango, and it was the whole first half of it was fully developed in the dream. All I had to do was wake up and write it down. And then that was in '85, and then I knew I needed to write another half to it, but I couldn't consciously do as well as I could in my dream state. So, but then finally, about in '87, I came up with the rest of it, and even then, I thought it was pretty good, but I was reluctant to play because I didn't have any confidence in my composing ability. So, but a lot of my friends and my fans that I played it for privately said, "Oh God, you got to play it in concert, do it." So in '87, I started playing that piece in concert, and then the following year, I started playing a couple of other pieces that I had written. Then, in July of 1990, starting on July 2nd, I started having dreams constantly with music, and just was barraged by ideas, musical ideas. And so I've been writing real steadily since then, and it's evolving on its own. Sometimes I'll write, like one of my fourth waltz, I wrote in a series of 7 dreams in a 6-day period, and in that I was actually sitting down in the dream, writing on the manuscript and checking the every now and then checking things on the guitar, and then making erasures and corrections and everything, and then I would wake up and write it out. Well, actually, I didn't write it out. I first wrote 1 page of it, and then I had another couple of dreams, and I wrote a little more, and then several days later, I got sick with the flu, and I was in bed, and I was too weak to get out of bed, but I had a series of 4 dreams during that day in which I was writing the music, and I would wake up between dreams and I would review it in my mind. I would visualize it on paper, and I would visualize it on the fingerboard, and go back to sleep, and then pick up the manuscript right where I left off and compose more. And after that last dream of that day, I was strong enough to get out of bed, and I had finished the piece in the last dream, and I thought, well, I can play it. So I got out of bed and I picked up the guitar, and I knew it. It was there. That's how that was written, to me, that's just miraculous. I have no idea how that works, But I think just all the I come from a family of musicians. My father's a conductor, a choral director, a cellist, and I come from many generations of musicians. And I was very heavily exposed to music from my prenatal state onward. I was constantly surrounded by music. And I think, the unconscious mind has a lot more power than most of us realize. And it's sort of somehow put all that stuff together. And I played so much music, and I read through every type of music for every instrument that I could get my hands on. And there was lots of music. So I got very good at reading music very quickly. I think just my unconscious mind sort of processed all this stuff that I'd heard and played over the years, and finally said, okay, now we're ready. And just started. I didn't make a decision to be a composer, it just happened. Yes?
I had a question about the guitar. I was wondering where the guitar came from, and most of the music you play seems to have a Spanish background. You mentioned the Mexican composer, and the tango came from Argentina.
Right.
Is guitar primarily a Spanish derivative instrument? Or?
Well, yeah, you could say that Spain was the cradle of the guitar. Actually, the Moors brought the lute to Spain during the 700 years that they occupied Spain, and yeah, it is. I think it is primarily a Spanish instrument. Although you can find music going back a couple hundred years, or more. Well, depending on what you consider a guitar. But like during the Renaissance, there was a Renaissance guitar which had only, and that was all over Europe, and even like Spanish guitar composer like Fernando Sor, who lived from the late 1700s to about 1839. His music is much more European sounding. It's you can hear the influence of Italian opera and all that, but I lived in Spain 7.5 years, and this guitar was made in Madrid by Jose Ramirez, the same maker who made guitars for Segovia. Did I leave something out? I thought there was another part to the question. But I speak fluent Spanish. I just always, from my earliest childhood, I always gravitated toward Spanish music. And my parents let me use the record player when I was very, very small, like 2, 3, 4 years old. And the stuff that I would listen to over and over again would be Bizet's Carmen, or the piano music of De Falla and stuff like that. I just completely always went for that, just instinctively. So, and I guess, I just was always thrilled with Latin American music also. And so a very large, I guess, I kind of developed a reputation for being very good at playing Spanish and Latin American music, and so that tended to make me do more of it. So a huge bulk of my repertoire before I started seriously composing was Spanish and Latin American music. So it had to have an influence. Although actually, I have like my sixth waltz is sort of also influenced by Johann Strauss Jr. and Chopin, because I grew up listening to those also. And I've written a piece sort of in the style of Schumann, and I have a Baroque suite which I haven't completed yet, but it's kind of like German Baroque music, so I didn't play that tonight, I guess. Yes?
Who are your favorite composers?
Depends on my mood. I listen to a very, very wide variety of music. I like every style of music. I used to not like country western, now I do.
Boo!
Yes.
I'm interested in how involved you are in your music. Are you singing? Usually an instrumentalist, and I'm very encouraged to see that, but is not such a part of their instrument, such a part of their music. Are you singing it? How are you feeling when you're playing?
I feel my vocal cords trying to go with the music. I also throughout my childhood and into my adolescence, I did a lot of volunteer choir stuff, and I sang in my father's choirs, and I also sang in high school choir, and I think that was very, very good experience for me in terms of hearing parts in music, hearing the various parts and how they put together. And I just was always I was just a good sight reader. I mean, after playing piano and then playing guitar, it got so like by the time I was in high school, I was a very good sight singer, so that the other boys in the baritone section would all want to sit next to me.
You get so much emotion out of your guitar.
I feel that one of the most difficult things about the guitar as an instrument is to make it sing. And that's what I try to do. That's one of the things I've focused on most. And another thing is projecting, which wasn't a problem because of the amplification. I used to be very much against the amplification, but I think now that the technology's better, I don't object to it at all. But, you know, sometimes you have to play in big concert halls with no amplification, and it's very difficult to be heard. Yes.
What, getting back onto the technical side, what do you think are some of the most important things for beginner and intermediate guitar players to be working on? Scales, arpeggios, pieces?
You answered it. Yeah, I'll tell you what, you know.
Segovia was really into his 3-octave scales. You know, he believed that, you know, actually, I got that diatonic.
Right, that's a good book. And the Abel Carlavaro scales are very good also. What I did was I practiced the scales with the Segovia fingering, but I also practiced scales using random fingerings. And just doing it every different way I could think of. You know, like when I started out, you know, I had some teachers and everything, but I got the Carcassi method. But I also got all the other methods I could get my hands on, and went through all of them, and went through them again, and then again. And each time I went through them, I would take those exercises in the first position, and then I would do them here, and then I'd do them here, and I'd, you know, do them every, because I just knew that I was going to have to be familiar with the entire fingerboard, and it wasn't good just to be, you know, locked into this position here.
I have another question. Now, when you're approaching a piece of music that you've never played before, how do you go about it? Do you learn all the dynamics, all the phrasing? Do you like do it all at once? Do you kind of graze through it and go back and add some of those things?
Well, I tend to be a very good sight reader. So when I first look at a piece, I read through it, and, you know, I mean, unless it's a real bizarre avant-garde piece, I don't do avant-garde music anymore. I don't like alienating audiences. I like pleasing people. But, yeah, I tend to do everything at once. I'm not a believer in practicing a piece with no dynamics and no expression, because...
How about with a metronome?
Well, if it turns out to be a really technically difficult piece, then I might use a metronome. I've gone through many periods of using metronome. You know, like, it depends on the person. If I have a student who has difficulty keeping an even tempo, then I'll make them practice with a metronome. You know, I practiced, but real difficult pieces is very great to take the metronome and put it real super slow and just keep it that way, you know, and practice the piece at a tempo that you can play, that you feel comfortable, and you're not straining yourself, and you don't make any mistakes. And so, like Jose Tomas, one of my teachers in Spain, he used to take beginners, and he would require them to learn scales and arpeggios from very difficult pieces, like the D minor chaconne from the Violin Partita, and the Concierto de Aranjuez by Rodrigo, and arpeggios, some of the really hard variations of the Nocturnal by Britten, you know, and they would just be really intimidated by this. But the secret was, he'd just give you those passages. He'd tell you them exactly what passages to practice, and say, if it's too hard, then go slower. You know, if it's still too hard, then that means you're playing it too fast. Go as slow as it takes. If you have to do one note and then wait 5 seconds and then do another note, do it that way. You know, I mean, but do it at the tempo that you can do it. And even a beginner can do that, you know, if you find the right tempo. And I'll tell you, within 2 or 3 years, some of those players, certainly by 5 years, could play anything. So and I'm very thankful myself that I never had a teacher who said, "You can't do this." No one ever told me that.
I had a teacher like that one time.
Yeah.
I proved him wrong, though.
Well, I just figured if I couldn't do something, something was wrong with me. And so I would just work even harder. And, you know, in my early years, I would get really angry, and break things and hit things. You know, it's like a lot of it, I wasn't using my analytical abilities. It was actually quite a bit later that I started learning how to analyze problems, how to think your way out of a problem rather than just force your way through it, you know. Yes.
Are you using your pinky in your right hand?
As a matter of fact, I am.
Is that common?
No.
What are the advantages?
Well, the advantage is I use it during times like if I want to play 5-note chord with all the notes simultaneously and get a balanced sound so that all the notes are very even. Like if I have a chord like this, then I'll use it. Or if I want to arpeggiate it and get it even sound. It's not the same if I take my thumb. Most guitar players, because they don't use the pinky, will have to go make a separation. And sometimes for musical effect, I'll choose that way, you know. But I mainly use it for playing chords, either as block chords or as a arpeggiated chord to get a real clean sound. I decided to do that on my own, actually, when I was 14 years old, because I read somewhere where before Francisco Tárrega, who was born in 1854, died around 1906, he was the one who started really using the ring finger. But Fernando Sor before that, and the lutenists in the Renaissance and the Baroque times, they had their pinky on the face of the instrument and used primarily thumb, index, and middle finger. A lot of them used flesh too, no nail. But then Tárrega took, as long as you're not using your A finger very much, they would do it with chords occasionally. But it does, having your pinky there restricts the movement of your A finger especially. And so Tárrega started using the A finger. I thought, well, it seemed to me the next step in the evolution was to play with the pinky. And about a year later, I came across the Laurindo Almeida method, and he advocated using the pinky. He uses we use PIMA for the Spanish words, pulgar, índice, medio, and anular, and CH for chico, meaning little. Now, Yamashita, the Japanese guitarist from Nagasaki, who has phenomenal facility, uses his pinky a lot, and he'll get, I can't do it, but he'll get like a tremolando effect with his pinky like this, going back and forth, and then he'll be playing chords and harmonics and stuff with the other fingers at the same time. Does that. He did the transcription of the entire pictures of an exhibition, pictures at an exhibition by Mussorgsky, all 10 movements for solo guitar. Yes.
You mentioned not liking to alienate audiences with the avant-garde music. I'm not aware of any avant-garde music for guitar. Do you personally like it, or?
Yeah, I do actually. I like it. Babbitt, John Cage has written for the guitar. God, there's a whole lot of stuff by lesser-known composers.
Could you give us a small example, or have you been working on, or do you remember?
Really been, Leo Brouwer is one of my favorites. When he went through his aleatoric period.
Is that a word?
That's a real way. Yeah. Aleatoric music means indeterminate. Like his Eternal Spiral starts off with tone clusters in boxes, and you can play them in any order you want. You know, that's the first page, and then there's different kinds of events on the second page, and it's like he'll have stuff like, and so there won't be exact pitches. There'll just be lines kind of jagged up and go up higher and then down and up like this, you know, and then that kind of stuff. And then he starts out on the first page. He goes, I haven't played it for years. It's kind of like auditory hallucinations, you know. But anyway. Any other questions? Leo Brouwer, actually, you know, a lot of the composers who during the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, were writing atonal music and aleatoric music, and went back to, like Leo Brouwer calls himself now a neo-romantic. But I'm always suspicious with any kind of terminology that uses the word new, because then I automatically I wonder, well, when does it stop being new? You know, New Age. Well, see, now I started hearing that term around in the 70s, you know, and that's the 90s already, you know.
It's middle age.
When's it going to be old age, you know? Or bossa nova, new beat, you know. Well, I've been listening to it now, you know, since I was a kid, you know. It seems kind of old to me now. And then, like, if I write a piece, you know, like, since I've only been composing seriously and consistently for the last 3.5 years or more, for me, an old piece is one that I wrote 2 or 3 years ago. You know, but that would be considered new music by, I guess, most other musicians' standards. I don't know what's... Anyway, yes?
I just wanted to ask you about editing. You know, sometimes Segovia and even Parkman, they have a real hard time with anybody that would re-edit their music. Do you have a problem with that? Sometimes things just seem, it's like their baby. You don't mess with their editing. Do you have a problem with that? Re-editing to suit you?
I've done a lot of that myself, but when I studied with Segovia, I knew better not to.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't, you know. I was invited to do a concert at USC for Segovia's last master class the year before he died, in 1986. They asked me to do a whole concert of all music of Manuel Ponce. They had, you know, invited a lot of his students, and then they had all these college kids that were really hot players that were playing in his class, and there was this one guy who was studying the Sonata Romantica by Ponce, and he changed all the fingerings. And Segovia said, "You won't play my fingerings? You don't want to play my fingerings?" And he goes, "No." And he goes, "Out!" That's the old authoritarian school, you know. I mean, he realized he was born in 1893, and he's from the old world, too. I mean, you just don't question, you know, like this popular phrase. I live in Berkeley. You know, I see people that, you know, I see bumper stickers that say "question authority" and everything. That doesn't work in the arts. It doesn't work. Because, you know, strangely enough, it would always be an American when I was studying with Segovia in Spain that would pull something like, say, "Why don't you try this?" Segovia would say, and the guy would say, this 18 or 19-year-old kid would say, "I tried that, it doesn't work." And Segovia would go, "Oh, okay." You keep playing, guy would keep playing, continue. the guy would finish playing the piece, and he goes, "Thank you very much. Next."
Right.
You know, it just doesn't.
Waste of time.
You know, it doesn't work. And I don't know. I guess I just instinctively knew that. You know, that you have to really show a lot of respect, and you don't challenge the teacher in front of a bunch of people, and you can ask questions and stuff. But you really, when you say something like, "I tried that, it doesn't work," I mean, that's very disrespectful. Very disrespectful. Yes.
You studied with Segovia, taking master classes with Hilario Diaz,
Mm-hmm.
Jose Luis
Rodrigo.
Jose Tomas. Of all of the teachers that you studied with, and when I did the show featuring you, I made it a point to mention a lot of the different people you studied with, because I feel it's important, because I think it helps to say who you are in terms of the different influences that you've had. But of all the teachers that you've studied with, who do you feel had the biggest influence on you?
They all influenced me in different ways. But the Segovia and the other three were students of Segovia. So everybody I studied with was from the Segovia school. But they gave me different angles. Jose Luis Rodrigo gave me a lot of encouragement, but he was also very critical and very analytical. But he would encourage me to go to all the concerts that I could go to, and he would meet me there. And he'd give me 3-4 hour lessons. In the last year I studied with him 4 years, all day. He put me on a day where he had no students and wouldn't take my money. So my teachers were very generous with me, so I try to be generous with my students. But he'd meet me at a concert, and not just guitar, but all kinds of concerts. And then during intermission, while I was 16, 17 years old, I thought it was great, and I wasn't that critical. So I'd say, "Well, what did you think?" He'd say, "What did you think?" And I'd tell him, and then I'd try to get from him what he thought, but he wouldn't say anything. Then after the concert, we'd go someplace for a drink, and in Spain there was no drinking age. It was no big deal. Go for a beer or something, or a wine, some hors d'oeuvres at a bar, and tapas. And I'd ask him what he thought, and he'd say it was terrible. And he'd tell me why. He'd go on a whole list of things that they were doing wrong. This is what they did wrong here. This is what they did wrong there. This is what and then he went, "I want you to go see them again and listen for all these things." And so I would. I'd go back, and listen to them again. And sure enough, all the stuff that he had said, they were doing. And that was very good. Tomas was also very critical and analytical. Tomas never gave me any praise the first 4 years. Not one positive, kind word. And then finally, when I was about 20, he said, "I think you're starting to mature." And then finally, by the time I was 21 and 22, he was saying really great things about my playing. That was really difficult for a lot of other students, to just get nothing but what you're doing wrong and what you need to do to make it right. And some people can't take that. For me, I was very good at taking criticism. My father actually probably taught me more about music than anybody. I used to play for my father, and he would coach me interpretation. Then Diaz, on the other hand, never said anything negative about anything to anybody. It was all positive. It was all praise. And for the people who were only studying with him, that was bad, I think. But, he just was such a kind-hearted, warm, sympathetic person that it was against his nature to say anything negative. And so, first time I played in his master class, he was the first person I had a private lesson with when I was 14 of importance. in Louisiana at the time, and I studied with him in Italy. And I remember the first time I played for him, he just said, "All right, now look, class, I want everybody to listen very carefully to this man's tone. This is an excellent example of beautiful tone, you know." And I just, oh yeah, you know. So I feel great, you know. It was kind of nice because I go, you know, from Tomas, it was just the opposite. He would tear your ego down, and then Diaz would build it back up. So it was very complimentary. But also, I mean, to me, I had an attitude like, a lot of the times that I went to Santiago, I used to ask other students for lessons, including people who were at a much lower level than me. Because I had this idea that what you learn, there isn't necessarily a certain hierarchical order to it. That everybody learns different lessons at different times. And so, and then also that a beginner, because they don't have, their mind isn't laden with all these preconceived ideas, has a fresher view sometimes. I've had beginner students show me fingerings. They say, "Well, what about this?" And I went, "Wow, that's a great idea," you know, and use it. Yeah, you know. So, you know, some of these. I remember this one guy from northern Spain named Miguel. He wasn't a real great player, and I asked him for a lesson. He goes, "What? You want me to give you a lesson?" Because I was one of the advanced students at that point. They said, "Yeah." I said, I think you could do it." Okay, so I'll tell you what. Pretend you're Jose Tomas, and I'm playing for you. Just pretend you're Jose Tomas. And so, okay. And the funniest thing about it was he started doing the same gestures and the same mannerisms, and he was really good. And I got one of my best lessons from this guy. He was saying, what would, because he started thinking he'd seen Tomas teach other people in master classes, what would Tomas say to this guy? Came up with it. So, and then like great players like Arthur Rubinstein, I mean, I have to, he influenced me very heavily in my way of playing. Use of rubato, I learned from him in Segovia by listening to them, by example, you know. And so that's, I can't, you know, for me, he was my teacher, even though I never met him. A lot of the more advanced students of Segovia's that I listened to when I was growing up, like Gili and Parkinin, influenced me also. You know, I just take from wherever I can.
Maybe one more question, Phillips.
Okay.
You always play without a footrest? And how does that affect the position of your guitar?
Well, lately I have been just being lazy. And my father told me there are two kinds of laziness. There's intelligent laziness and there's stupid laziness. And what you want is you want to be intelligently lazy. Like use of economy of motion, you know, when you're playing, when you think, you know, actually that's an intelligent form of laziness. So this is a stupid form of laziness, I confess. So, I mean, because actually I went through a long period of figuring out how to sit, with a footstool, and how to balance my body, and how to balance the guitar. If I had a footstool, I could demonstrate, you know how I could sit and I could take my arms away. The guitar is perfectly balanced like this. It makes, you know, and that way I'm not holding the guitar this way. When I'm going like this, you know, like that, well then I can't. If I let go, the guitar is just going to fall. You know, part of it I'm using the weight of my arm when I do this, and part of the reason I like doing this is because I'm getting a different angle, different tone, you know. But, you know, I go off and on through different periods. Sometimes I'll just be real formal like this, you know. But I guess, you know, I spent the last 9 years
hanging out with a lot of flamenco people, and they don't care about that kind of stuff, and they're very relaxed, and they just like, they'll sit like this, you know. So I just sort of got into the habit of just being casual about it, and in some ways it's better because I don't think about it. I free my mind from that stuff, you know, like, or the idea that, well, you know, I like being able to play any position. I used to lie down in bed and practice.
Lotus specific.
Okay, well.
Well, on behalf of, we want to ask everyone to give.
What?
One of your waltzes, your original waltzes.
I played two of them, I know.
More.
I don't play flamenco. No, I think maybe it's kind of getting late here now.
Well, I just want to ask everyone to give Philip a great big applause.
And now it's been played in Italy and Germany and Ireland.
So that's the time. Very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good, thanks. Very nice. Well, you notice when I sit properly, my back is straight, I'm balanced, and you have a good visual thing. You have a slant here, guitar mount to the shoulder. See, all you have to do is look down and you can see the guitar slanted this way so you can see the visual. And you can also use gravity, you know, to help you a little bit. So I mean, but the thing is, the angle will change the tone. You know, and so it'll get, generally tends to be fatter, thicker sound. Horizontal kind of position, because then your arm is going to be diagonal in relation to the string.
Yeah, that's possible.
Well, see, I did all kinds of experimentation. When I was 19 years old and I was studying Diaz, I was working on this piece called Variations on Counter by John Duarte. And I got selected as one of the best players in the class to do the student concert in the master class. And I was having trouble with the scales. And what happened was, I found that because I was resting my arm here, and also because I was having to bring my shoulder up, instead of the guitar, instead of later on I learned how to have the guitar this kind of angle, so that the guitar was balanced and I didn't have to use my arm to hold. But before I was sitting like most other classical guitarists with my back twisted and the guitar this way, and having to hold the guitar with my arm here and raising the shoulder. John Williams I've seen play that way, but he can do it. I don't have his natural facility, you know, so I have to, you know, find a better way for me. But at that time I didn't know how to sit like this with guitar balance. And I was backstage practicing and I was doing these fast scales. I was having trouble. And then without thinking, I put it on my right side, and all of a sudden I could play the scales and not like that, but my tone was fatter, bigger. So I put the right foot, for 7 years I played with the guitar on the right foot on the footstool, and I got really good results. But then I got into some body work, Aston patterning, Alexander technique ideas.
and that changed. That's and Carlovaro also, who could balance his guitar in his lap perfectly. I mean, when I met Carlovaro, and I hung out with Carl, I should have mentioned Carlovaro tonight because he had a real big influence on me. I mean, I never officially studied with him, but I spent a lot of time hanging out with him. Plus, I know a lot of his students really well. Yeah, he's really, oh yeah. If it is, I could go. I gave a 5-hour discourse on technique once. There's a lot of different ideas.
Yeah.
Systematic use of the left arm and systematic use of the right arm to save the small muscles of the fingers. A lot of the work. Because you'll never have as much stamina with the fingers by themselves as the large muscles of your arm. When you distribute that work into your arms, you have much more stamina.
Did you enjoy that?
That's when.
Hey. Hi, Luke. Say something.
Hey, man. How are you doing? See you.
Very fine.
Hello, everybody. My name is Leon Atkinson.